New York is going to be turning on congestion pricing soon, assuming it hasn't been stalled by lawsuits, New Jersey, or lawsuits from New Jersey. A toll to drive a car into a cramped city center might just be the tool to transform North American cities, as well as transit for the better, simultaneously working in numerous ways to keep people and commerce moving, while also funding infrastructure and alternatives that can make our cities better. But how do congestion pricing schemes work, and what's their potential in North America? Let's break it down. Welcome to RM Transit, a channel about making cities better with better mobility. Consider supporting the channel on Patreon to help me bring you more videos. So in layman's terms, how does congestion pricing work? Well, take a city like Toronto, for example. You define an area where the charge will be applied, and this is usually the city center and adjacent areas where road space is at a premium. You then use on-road cameras and sensors to automatically charge drivers a fee, kind of like a transit fare or a more conventional road toll when you're driving into these areas. To be clear though, there's a lot of flexibility. If you have a green vehicle, your license plate might allow you to get a discount on the congestion toll. Commercial vehicles could get a discount on the toll overnight, encouraging a shift of deliveries to late at night when there isn't a ton of traffic. And usually ambulances, buses, police cars, and the like are exempted from the tolls for obvious reasons. You often see these zones defined by rivers, rail lines, and other features that make it natural where to place the cameras, perhaps at bridges or underpasses. In New York's implementation, the congestion charge won't apply on major roads encircling Lower Manhattan, encouraging people to drive around neighborhoods rather than through them. When you look at the media, this scheme is talked about like it's some sort of radical policy, but the reality is that tons of cities around the world have different restrictions on driving into city centers. Many cities in Asia, Latin America, and Europe use license plates to determine what people can drive into the city on a given day, and lots of cities restrict people being able to drive across a city center to go to a destination on the other side, as opposed to driving in the city center only for local trips. So why am I so into this? Well, the reality is that congestion pricing is incredibly powerful, and it has a lot of potential to improve public transportation. It's also actually fairly simple to build a strong coalition for. For business owners and tradespeople, an extra hour in traffic a day or slow shipments means that you're making less money. All of that extra congestion so that Alan from New Jersey can drive his Cybertruck into one of the densest places on Earth. Of course, with less cars crowding the streets, you can easily make the case for more bus lanes and bike lanes. And here it's a double whammy because you're going to need all that space for all the new people on two wheels and on buses who are going to use transit and cycle because it's now more expensive to drive. And for transit and cycling, it's much bigger than that. Money from tolls, which can be very substantial in major cities, can be directly invested in new cycling and transit infrastructure, and all kinds of other mobility programs, from electric garbage trucks to safety skirt programs that keep pedestrians and cyclists from being pulled under a truck, which are common in Europe and Asia, but not in North America. How you actually use these funds, particularly for transit, is very important. You see, if congestion pricing works, and a lot of evidence from around the world suggests it does, then you might find that over time you have less money to play with because there's less congestion. So while you have it, the funding should go towards investments that bring down the cost of operating public transit, be it more resilient tracks that require less maintenance, computerized signaling, or electric trolley buses that last much longer than conventional diesel ones. This is doubly important because unlike toll revenue, cost-saving infrastructure won't crater during an economic recession, allowing you to still provide a high level of transit service, which is really important for maintaining longevity in people's habits. This is obviously very good for the environment on multiple levels. Less people driving, incentives for vehicle electrification, increased public transit and cycling use, and funds to invest in greening the city, air quality, and emissions reduction programs. But it's also about fundamentally reshaping our cities. In the olden days, cities used to be dense because people typically lived close to their place of work or education or a transit line, but the car made suburbia and its unsustainable land appetite very cheap. Congestion pricing is a huge economic lever that can help incentivize car-light transit-oriented development. I can, of course, already imagine the argument. Taxes, bad. Climate change is a hoax. But even just on the economic merits, congestion pricing is a very good idea. And that's because it discourages the wasteful way we so often see our precious city center road space used, often by single people in large vehicles. Someone who didn't think to take the subway shouldn't be slowing down a shipment of groceries to the grocery store for free. Businesses mostly can't take public transit, but people can. And people obviously already understand this. Red states have lots of road tolling. In fact, I'd probably say they have more road tolling than blue states. We've long understood this with mass transit. Riders pay fares to help fund the operations of the transit system, but also to send signals about where more service is needed. But for far too long, the price people paid for roads didn't vary depending on whether they were using a low-value piece of road infrastructure or some of the highest-value road infrastructure in the world. Of course, you probably don't want to just drop congestion pricing into your city. However, as New York's multiple multi-thousand-page report on the environmental impact of less driving shows, you probably don't need to worry about that. But at the same time, when you're implementing a policy like congestion pricing, it's a good time to do a major bike lane build-out or a transit network redesign to help push more people to these better alternatives and to remind them that they often exist already. You've got to use both stick and carrot. A lot of US cities would also probably need other tweaks. For example, you can't charge much for congestion when there isn't a lot of congestion. Cities where the downtown primarily consists of 6 and 8 lane roads are probably not going to get a lot of mileage from this policy. At the same time, you can't really do a broad, every downtown has a congestion charge now type of policy because for many downtowns, the weak ones, it might actually cause more harm than good. If your downtown doesn't have a lot of reasons for the average citizen to visit, offices, sports arenas, and the like, well then you might just kill your downtown by charging people extra for the privilege of going there. The reason that this policy makes so much sense in a place like Manhattan is because people are still going to go to Manhattan even if it costs a bit more, and most people are taking public transit anyways. Fortunately, while this might not work in Dallas tomorrow, it might work in a lot of US cities, and I can think of a number where it would work in the next couple of years to a decade. Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, Boston, Philly, DC, and maybe even Portland and Denver could all potentially make the case for this in the future. That's not to mention that a bunch of big Canadian cities could also do the same. All of these cities could benefit from congestion pricing, most of them have decent bike lanes, and most of them also have a fairly robust public transit system. With the extra boost from congestion pricing, who knows where things could go? So we need to start having those conversations, because where New York goes, the rest of North America naturally follows. Thanks for watching.